Om
Bhagavate Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yutabadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sakraja Sahagana Tam Sajivam Satvairam Swavadudam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Kopisha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanjakalpatarubhyascha Kirpa Sindhuvayeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Shashwin, thank you very much for reciting the Mangla Charan. As we await Prabhuji's arrival, let us even read the Sanskrit. So we start with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shashwin, are you able to do that as well?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtu Prashishvavadvishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Vyasa Ishwari Hagnai Krishne Nadbhuta Karmana Prabodito Pitihasai Nabudhyata Sucharpita. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Shashwin, for reciting the Mangla text so nicely. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Please accept our humble obeisances on behalf of everybody in this group, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for joining us, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 1, Chapter 8, which are the prayers of Queen Kunti. And the text for today is 46. Prabhuji, we started with the Manglacharan and we have read text 46. Over to you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much, Maji. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Please forgive me for being a little late. It was the first day on a new job today, and I've got a very enthusiastic manager who just wanted to talk and talk to me. So unfortunately, I could not refuse. So we're reading Canto 1, Chapter 8, Text 46, so wonderfully recited. I'm just going to go through the word for word. Vyasa Adiyahe, by great sages headed by Vyasa. Ishvara, the Almighty God. Iha, by the will of. Gyanahi, by the learned. Krishnena, by Krishna himself. Adbhuta Karmana, by one who performs all superhuman work. Praboditaha, being solaced. Api, although. Itihasahe, by evidences from the histories. Na, not. Abhutyata, satisfied. Sucha arpitaha, distressed. Translation: King Yudhisthira, who is much aggrieved, could not be convinced, despite instructions by the great sages headed by Vyasa and the Lord Krishna himself, the performer of superhuman feats, and despite all historical evidence. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The pious king Yudhisthira was mortified because of the mass massacre of human beings in the battle of Kurukshetra, especially on his account. Duryodhana was there on the throne, and he was doing well in his administration, and in one sense there was no need of fighting. But on the principle of justice, Yudhisthira was to replace him. The whole clique of politics centered around this point, and all the kings and residents of the whole world became involved in this fight between the rival brothers. Lord Krishna was also there on the side of King Yudhisthira. It is said in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva, men were killed in the 18 days of the battle of Kurukshetra, and some hundreds of thousands were missing. Practically, this was the greatest battle in the world within 5,000 years. This mass killing, simply to enthrone Maharaj Yudhisthira, was too mortifying, so he tried to be convinced with evidences from histories by great sages like Vyasa and the Lord himself that the fight was just because the cause was just. But Maharaj Yudhisthira would not be satisfied, even though he was instructed by the greatest personalities of all the time. Krishna is designated herein as the performer of superhuman actions, but in this particular instance, neither he nor Vyasa could convince King Yudhisthira. Does it mean that he failed to be a superhuman actor? No, certainly not. The interpretation is that the Lord, as Ishvara, or the Supersoul in the hearts of both King Yudhisthira and Vyasa, performs still more superhuman action because the Lord desired it. As Supersoul of King Yudhisthira, he did not allow the king to be convinced by the words of Vyasa and others, including himself, because he desired that the king hear instructions from the dying Bhishmadev, who was another great devotee of the Lord. The Lord wanted that at the last stage of his material existence, the great warrior Bhishmadev see him personally and see his beloved grandchildren, King Yudhisthira, etc., now situated on the throne, and thus pass away very peacefully. Bhishmadev was not at all satisfied to fight against the Pandavas, who were his beloved fatherless grandchildren. But the Kshatriyas are also very stern people, and therefore he was obliged to take the side of Duryodhan because he was maintained at the expense of Duryodhan. Besides this, the Lord also desired that King Yudhishthir be pacified by the words of Bhishmadev, so that the world could see that Bhishmadev excelled all in knowledge, including the Lord himself. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestha Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschatya Deshatarine. So Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this wonderful verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I was reading this verse and I was thinking about the key themes. There's so much to extract from the verse itself and also the purport. And what came up for me was I was told once, I heard in a wonderful class at the manor one time, a morning class on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that a senior devotee was advising that in order to connect with the Shastras, in order to connect with the Bhagavatam, we need to, what can really help us do this is try and get into the emotions of what the devotees are feeling, or try and connect with what emotions are the devotees are feeling as we're reading it. And so I was thinking, what is Yudhishthira Maharaj feeling at this moment? So he's feeling a deep sense of sadness. He's almost, perhaps it seems like he's feeling guilt for killing so many. He's having some regret and he's in some anxiety. He's lamenting. And ultimately, he has doubts. He has doubts whether they did the right thing. Because here, Prabhupada is explaining in the purport, it is said in the Mahabharata Adipurva that 640 million men were killed in the 18 days of the Battle of Kurukshetra. So this mass killing simply to enthrone Maharaj Yudhishthir was too mortifying. So he found it mortifying. This is a very strong word, mortifying. So I was thinking about all these feelings that Yudhishthir Maharaj is going through, and thinking, okay, so how does that relate to us? How does that relate to me as a practitioner of Krishna consciousness? And I was thinking that, you know, in life we all, and as practitioners of Krishna consciousness, sometimes we may have doubts. We may have doubts about the process of Krishna consciousness. We may have doubts about ourselves and our ability to really make it back home, back to Godhead, or really do this process effectively. So we have doubts in ourselves, and sometimes we may doubt even the Shastras itself, and we think, you know, did this really happen? So, and I want to raise such a doubt with you because I recently had a very good question by someone, is that it said in this very purport for this verse, 640 million men were killed, not even just participated, were killed in the 18 days on the Battle of Kurukshetra. Now, does anyone know the entire population of India at the moment? Roughly. And anyone has it hazard at even as a guess?
Yeah, 1.35 billion.
1.35 billion. Yeah.
1.4 also they say sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mataji. So we can see here that that this number would equate to more than half the population of India, and Kurukshetra is very, you know, is a small part of India. How could this many soldiers, more than 600, so maybe we're talking about 1 billion soldiers just in this battlefield, how could they even fit on on the battlefield. And surely then, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but surely then this means that this is all just, Prabhupada actually will sometimes say this, that the non-believers will say, this is all just fairy tales, this is make-believe, this didn't really happen. How could this be real, So I'd love to hear what I asked, I was asked this question actually by someone. So I would love to hear if there's anyone has any thoughts on, if someone was to pose this to you, how can Kurukshetra is such a small area of India, and India's, that's almost more than half the population of the entire of India. How could how could basically about 1 billion soldiers fit in Kurukshetra? Has anyone any thoughts on this?
Hare Krishna. Yes, continue, Mataji. Urmila Mataji.
Yeah, I think that at that time, one person must be having 3 times, 4 times the strength of what we are having now.
Okay.
So they counted that way, strength-wise.
Oh, they could. So it's not. You're saying that this number doesn't refer to the number of men; it refers to the strength.
Strength, yeah. Or another thing that India was in one part. There were not that many continents. They were all one. Now
Okay.
the earth is divided, but at that time it was one part. So Kurukshetra must be very big.
Thank you, Mataji. So that's Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, using logic here and saying and referring to the history that India was wasn't split up into like Pakistan, etc. At that stage, and India was a bigger country, and also the number is not referring to the number of soldiers; it's the strength. But I can,
Because
yeah.
Australia was also connected to India. And
Mm,
when the Kurukshetra war was won, Yudhishthir became the Raja, and then it was said that Yudhishthir Maharaj was the king of the whole earth, I mean, whole dunya, whatever, whole world.
thank you very
It
much,
was all
Mataji.
in one part, so the Kurukshetra must be very big at that time.
Very so nice. Thank you so much, Mataji, for giving your opinion. So, Bharatvarsha is described as like Yudhishthira Maharaj wasn't just the Maharaj of India; he was the Maharaj of the whole world. So this was a battle of the whole world. It wasn't just certain territories within Bharat, so or just India. But so thank you very much, Mataji. That does make sense to some degree. But I will say that for me, from what I can tell, Prabhupada said it doesn't say strength. He isn't referring to strength here. He said he uses the word 640 million men, and so that means individuals. And second thing is Kurukshetra is still a place which one can visit even today. So one can see, the area of Kurukshetra, and it hasn't, it and the other regions next to it in India. So that region, unless the world expanded and things like that, it still doesn't. For me, playing the part of a non-believer, an atheist, doesn't quite make sense to me still. So I'm going to say that the battlefield of Kurukshetra, you can still measure it, and then if we are assuming that Prabhupada says here 640 million men, then that means that there were that many soldiers and it needed a space to take place there. So I think it was a nice explanation by Mataji. I'd like to add something to it, which I was so Kritika Mataji, did you have something to add to this?
Ruchi, I just wanted to add that not only men, but there were horses and elephants and other animals. So
Yeah.
there were a lot of lives there on such a
Mm,
small place.
yes.
According to my understanding, the 640 million men were not killed in one day. It was
No.
over a period of 18 days.
Mm,
So not all of them were on the battlefield. So today, probably a million from both the sides were fighting, and then they get killed and all the bodies were taken away, and then tomorrow it's fresh again, a new battalion or something like that, and that might comprise of 640 million. But however, this figure is a lot to,
Yeah.
with
So
the animals and everybody. Yes. Hare Krishna.
thank you, Mataji. Yes. There's a
Pramila Mataji wanted to say something, and are you go
y-
with Prabhu?
yes,
Yes,
please, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I wondered if Kurukshetra, being a sacred place where good conquers evil, had a lot to do with it. Plus, is this all Krishna's Leela? Because he says in the Gita, when he speaks to Arjuna, he says, Even if you don't kill these people, they are already dead."
Hmm. Yes, thank you, Pramila Mataji. Yeah, so there's some really really nice point here, Mataji, that all these people Krishna's already said these people are already dead. And then did Arya Govinda probably did you have a point?
Prabhuji, okay, I was just contemplating, were they fighting in different dimensions, not only on the earth, maybe on the air or something? I mean, I was just contemplating. I'm not so sure about it.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So there were some battles. If you read the Mahabharata, some people could go into the air. Ghatotyach, he had some ability like that. But ultimately, we're saying, that it wasn't. Kritika Mataji was trying to say maybe different battalions came in at different times during the 18 days. Everyone wasn't present in the full 18 days. I'm saying there's a possibility they were. How? And the explanation that I was given, I think all the points everyone has made, it's been really nice, and I think it's contributed to this. But also, ultimately, who was there? Krishna, and Krishna is beyond time and space, and that is very succinctly is that I was listening to Srila Prabhupada on a lecture on doubt, because it seems like at this moment Yudhisthira has doubt, and we're almost trying to justify this by knowledge. We could all take a trip and do a parikram, and we'll go to Kurukshetra and we'll measure it, and then we'll see, okay, what's the average size of men, how many could fit, and all this kind of thing, and we'll accumulate some knowledge. But ultimately, Srila Prabhupada, he said something really wonderful, which really struck with me, was that, like, you can't understand Krishna just by your knowledge, because your knowledge is limited and Krishna is unlimited. And this is what applies to its Leela, is that sometimes, especially when it comes to Krishna Leela, we can't apply material logic to something which is divine, which is spiritual. As Pramila Mataji rightly said as well, is that this is part of Krishna's divine Leela. And Krishna's already said, I've already killed everyone here. So this was just one nice point from the purport, with I thought was good to churn a little bit, because it makes us deepens our kind of understanding, and it's also good for me also to look at it from different angles, and hopefully for its benefit for all of us to understand sometimes that we'll get questioned. We'll get questioned on Krishna consciousness. We may have family members, friends, associates who aren't practicing Krishna consciousness, or even people who are, but they come with us with doubts, and that can create some doubt in our mind. How is this possible? But ultimately, the only way we can really clear all our doubts isn't through just gathering lots and lots of knowledge, because this isn't a gyan process. This is a process, bhakti. It's a process of devotion. I appreciate that we've used a lot of time just churning this little point here, so apologies for that. There was so much that I wanted to cover today. But ultimately, I also just wanted to touch upon addressing our anxieties and our doubts that we have, just as Yudhishthira Maharaj was facing doubt at this time. And there were three things which I thought of, which I actually spoke yesterday in a class that I gave at the Manor, which I wanted to refer to, which is also relevant to anxiety and doubt. I mentioned to the audience there that we all face problems in life. You know, we have health problems, we have finance problems, family, work, and there's times where we may not be responsible for the death of 640 million soldiers, and you can only imagine what a heavy burden that must have been to carry for Yudhishthir Maharaj. However, we do have responsibilities in life. We do face problems, and ultimately the details are different, but the feelings we can relate to, this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of regret, this feeling that we've done something wrong. And what is the solution to this, really? So just I have a short acronym which will hopefully help with this, with reference to some key key verses from the Bhagavad Gita. So a wonderful verse which I'd like to meditate on, as recently I've reconnected with this verse from the Bhagavad Gita. In the 18th chapter, Krishna says, Matchita sarva durgani mat prasadat tarasyasi ata jetvam ahankaran na sharosyasi vinakshasi. Very famous verse where Krishna says, if you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. And I thought this really ties in nicely to this verse here, because Yudhishthir Maharaj, it's actually said he wasn't even listening. He couldn't even hear the words of Krishna at this point. Now, in one sense, you could say Yudhishthir Maharaj, he's a pure devotee of the Lord. But on the other hand, he's acting in false ego because he's mortified by all these deaths, even though, yes, he's not Arjun, he didn't have the Bhagavad Gita spoken to him, but he's a devotee of the Lord. Make no mistake, Yudhishthir is a real pure devotee of the Lord. And he knows that Krishna has already killed these people, and he was just doing his duty on one level. On another level, you can see because he's grieving, because he's regretting, he's not fully conscious of Krishna and Krishna's position at that moment in time. So what can we do when we're not conscious of Krishna at certain times in our life? We're forgetful of him. We're thinking that this situation, these emotions that I'm feeling, this anxiety that I'm feeling, these doubts that I'm feeling are overwhelming for me. So at that point, I would say stop, and you need to enter the race. Race, R. R stands for results. So first examine, we stop, we enter the race, we stop and examine, are we attached to the results of our actions? And I'll talk a little bit about this, hopefully I have some time. A stands for ask for help. So we need to approach someone, a guru, shiksha guru, a diksha guru, and a diksha guru can clear, or a siksha guru, a guru can clear these doubts for us. Srila Prabhupada often says, I will kick all these stumbling blocks that you have, I will kick them all out of the way. C stands for connect to God. And perhaps I can explain a few little ways in which we can do this when we're in these difficult moments. And E stands for escape. So the first letter in this acronym that I've given of race, when we're feeling anxiety, when we're feeling doubtful, is sometimes we feel anxiety, we have to maybe stop and examine, are we attached to the R results? Are we attached to the results of our actions? This concept of verse that I mentioned many times, Karmanya Vadikaraste Mafaleshu Kadachana Makarma Falaheturbur Mate Sangos Tav Karmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Never think yourself the cause of the results of your activities. Never be attached to not doing your duty. So I thought this was quite relevant also, because if we look at Yudhishthir Maharaj, he's feeling responsible. He's thinking, this is all my fault. when really we know that he's, Krishna is the doer, and they were acting under direct orders of Krishna. So thinking that these result is a result of his actions only is wrong in one sense. But sometimes when we feel anxiety, lowering that down to our level, we may be a student in the student life, and we're in so many anxiety about how we performed in our studies, in our final exams. We may be working, and we're anxious about the results of our work and whether we're performing. Yeah, I've just started a new job today, and with any new profession, new job, usually you're under review. So if I don't pass my performance review at the end of 3 months, they will cancel my employment. So that maybe can cause anxiety, or health also, and ultimately we're afraid of death, and feeling those feelings and that fear. But if we can drill down to this and think, okay, if I'm a student, the results aren't up to me. Ultimately, everything we recognize on a philosophical level is coming from God. And even if we think on a material level, the paper, I may have misinterpreted some of the questions on the paper, on the exam paper. The examiner may be in a bad mood that day. So many things can go wrong. But what is in my control? I can study hard for the exam. I can do my very best. I can do what is in my control. I can try and practice past papers. My job situation. Okay, I'm not in control. Something may go wrong. They may not like me so much, but I can do my best endeavors to work hard. I can try and be open to feedback. And ultimately, whatever situation we're feeling in life, whenever we're feeling this anxiety, a lot of the time, I know I can speak just for myself, is that we're worried about what other people will think. We're all worried about the results of our actions, and that puts us in a state of anxiety. That's one thing. I want to just give I'm sure I've perhaps talked about this, is at Janmashtami time at the temple, we do many plays, and one such play we're doing on the Bhagavatam, actually on the pastime of Parikshit Maharaj. And during this particular play, everything was going wrong, and the mics weren't working. So people at the back of the play were shouting, "We can't hear you! We can't hear you!" And then some of the actors hadn't learnt their lines, so they were coming onto the stage in front of the audience and reading from their phones, lifting their phones up and reading the script like that. The flow of the play was awful. The music wasn't in sync. And in one of our showings, even that we had a backing screen with some visuals, and the screen fell down. And at that time, me and the crew for the play were feeling like really dejected and wanting to give up and thinking, should we just stop this play now? This is embarrassing, And then we do about 10 shows a day on Janmashtami. And so I walked off for a bit, had a break in between shows. I chanted. I remembered this particular verse from the Gita, and I thought, no, this is just my duty. This is just my duty. I've committed to this service, so we'll just do the best that we can and leave the results up to Krishna. If Krishna wants this play to be a failure, then that's up to him. We're doing this for his pleasure, and maybe he's trying to teach us a lesson in humility and tolerance. And I kid you not, after that, after I had this kind of thought that came to mind, and I prayed and I chanted, after that, all the mics worked. The actors that didn't know their lines, they left, so we filled in their part. The screen stayed in one place, and the audience were very, very satisfied with the play. Everything flowed and everything, and we felt elated. So that was almost instantaneous kind of reciprocation from being detached from the results. The next point in acronym RACE, RA. A is ask for help, but in particular a sadhu, so a devotee of the Lord, who can give us some direction. Sometimes when we're faced with anxiety, when we're faced with doubt, We're not sure which direction to go in. And it's important in this stage that we approach a devotee who can give us some direction. And someone, this is a really important point, and there's so much to extract from there. I'm excited to explore this next part where will in the Bhagavatam, where we'll go to approach the teachings of Bhishma Dev, because there's so much wonderful things to extract from there in terms of relationships. But here, one thing to note is that Yudhishthira Maharaj, it was part of Krishna's divine Leela. So Bhishma Dev had a boon where he could die at any moment, and Krishna fulfilled his boon. Krishna almost served his devotee in this way by making sure he's surrounded by his beloved Pandavas. So that was fulfilling the wish of Bhishma Dev. However, also Yudhishthira Maharaj listened to Bhishma Dev and his teachings and was pacified because he had such a close relationship with Bhishma Dev. He really trusted Bhishma Dev. And this is an important note to make, and it's taught. And Bhishma Dev actually talks about the principles of trust. Hopefully, we can talk about that a little later. So when we're struggling to with our anxiety, with our doubts, earlier in the Gita, the wonderful verse by Arjun, Garbanya dosapata svabhava pachamitam dharma samudha chetaha yastrayasha nishitam bruhitam me shishasteham shadimam tam prapanam. Very famous, beautiful verse and it's very early in the Gita. So the first kind of chapter and the beginning part of the second chapter, Arjun's just expressing his emotions. And then finally he comes to the point where he says, now I am confused due to miserly weakness. I've lost all composure due to miserly weakness. And then he submits to Krishna at this moment, and he says, I'm confused about what it is that is my duty. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So can we act in this way when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling doubtful, when we're not sure which way to go? And can we just surrender at the feet of a devotee, if not physically, like Arjun possibly did to Krishna, but at least in our minds, we can do that and say, with our hands clasped, we can say, please, can you help me? Can you guide me? There was a point where I was in a very difficult situation myself a few years ago. I'd left the ashram and I'd taken a job, and it was very detrimental to my Krishna consciousness, this job. And at the same time, it was connected in one sense. There was a lot of services available to me. I had a wonderful, as a result of this job, I had a wonderful preaching service to children at lunch times. I had like a Krishna club, and it was very satisfying for me. But at the same time, because of the demands of the job, because of the lack of structure, I was really struggling in the thing which gives us strength in Krishna consciousness, sadhana. And so I approached a senior devotee, someone I consider a Shiksha guru, and I wasn't sure what to do. And he was able to see outside of my situation. Sometimes when we're in a difficult situation, we're facing anxiety and doubts, we can't see the forest from the trees. So, but someone, a devotee, a guru, a sadhu, can see outside and pull our minds out of there. And through his advice, I was able to. He said, "You, Kamal, Prabhu, you must leave. You must leave this place." And surely enough, I took his advice, and I was able to leave that place and lead a lot more balanced life while still engaging in services which were nourishing to me. So that's the second point: is ask for help. And I think it's a sign of strength. Definitely, sometimes we think that we're weak. In one sense, we are weak, but in another sense, it's a sign of strength, spiritual strength to recognize and humility to recognize that we're limited. We're not limitless. We're not Krishna. And to ask for help is a sign of strength. So the third point, race, if you remember, anxiety, stop, enter the race, or stop being attached to the results. If we can, are we attached to the results? A, ask for help. C, connect to God. So later in the Srimad Bhagavatam, amazing devotee of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj, In a very famous verse, he says, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smarnam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dashyam Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. So here, Prahlad Maharaj gives the 9 processes of devotional service. So, sometimes this is a very personal process. And although it's great to, as I've discussed in previous sanghas, that we can go to the morning program and engage in all 9 of these. But we all have different inclinations. So in those times that we're really, really struggling with anxiety, with doubt, we can think back to those times where we really, really felt nourished within Krishna consciousness. So think of a time when you felt really connected. It's not necessarily through knowledge, is it? It's not through gyan, but it's a feeling we get a reciprocation from the Lord by something we've done in connection to Him. So, Shravanam, perhaps we're very inclined to hear about pastimes of the Lord, and it's like nectar to our ears. And sometimes we just feel this feeling within our heart that, oh, Krishna is here. Kirtanam, sometimes devotees, through chanting of the holy names of the Lord, they feel a deep connection, and they could just feel it there. It's not a gyan process, but they can feel a deep connection to the Lord there. Vishnu Smaranam, remembering the Lord, remembering his pastimes, remembering his form. And this sometimes can help devotees feel connected to him. Pada Sevanam, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, or Archanam, performing worship, performing arti. Actually, even modern psychology says that by performing simple actions, the mind can be calm. So this is actually a practical thing we can do as well. And I found for myself sometimes, I wake up in the mornings, I get ready, and I do simple arti before I chant. And I don't know if any of you can relate, but sometimes when we're facing a lot of things in multiple areas in life, family, work, relationships, service, many responsibilities, sometimes you can wake up and think, Krishna, I've got so many things on my plate, and the mind can be disturbed. Maybe we've been dreaming about, instead of Krishna, we've been dreaming about all the things we have to do the next day. And I found that just by performing, for me personally, by just performing, I stay away from technology in the mornings. I'll maybe just I'll open the Bhagavatam, I'll read a verse, and then I'll do the arti in the morning, a simple arti, simple puja, and do an offering to the Lord. And just by doing these offerings to the Lord, by performing the arti, by performing this archanam, I find it very, very grounding. I feel very connected, and I find that my anxiety is reduced. So this is something practical. Then we have vandanam, prayer. So I'm sure we can all relate that, praying in front of the deities is extremely powerful, or just making prayers, personal prayers to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada often says, as I've said, that this isn't a knowledge process, but where does buddhi come from? Comes from Krishna. So we can pray to the Lord for the intelligence to get us through, to give us the strength, give us the intelligence to get through these difficulties that we're facing through connecting to Him. And then we can come to the point of dasyam, which is becoming a servant of the Lord, sakyam, becoming His friend, and finally atma nivedanam, which is surrendering everything to Him. But it's such a wonderful process that you've got 9 options here, whichever one you prefer. This is a personal process. But if you're really struggling, do what enthuses you. Think of a time when you've really felt enthused in Krishna consciousness, and do that. I feel like this sangha is a place for me also to share. Even yesterday, I was asked to give the Bhagavad Gita class at the manor, and at the time, people were doing candle offerings to Lord Damodar, Yashoda Damodar, and so it was very, very busy at that time. And I approached the coordinator and I said, Prabhuji, you know, I'm scheduled to give class at 6. Is that okay? And he was like, I don't know why they, you know, they shouldn't be giving class at this time. Offerings are going throughout the class. I'll be yelling at people not to burn each other. You know, it'll be very difficult for you to give class. And I was like, okay, Prabhuji, and should I stop? Should I not give? And then he said, it's up to you. It's up to you. And I thought, if authority doesn't tell me not to give, I must give because I've been given the service. So I was feeling a bit apprehensive, but I thought, okay, let me just give. And I looked for the Vyasa-san in the temple, and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, Krishna, maybe you're telling me not to give the class, you know, and then taking the Vyasa-san for a program with Shivram Maharaj. So there's no Vyasa-san for me to sit. And then I was thinking, well, I need to put, you know, at least read the Bhagavad Gita from somewhere and put it down. And there's no one to. And then I thought, okay, let me just put some things down. And I took the stand and put it on its side so I could still use it. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, I was feeling anxiety because I felt that perhaps although I'm still practicing Krishna consciousness to my best efforts, I used to read a lot more than, like, now I'm married and more responsibilities. I feel like I had more knowledge before than I do now. I was reading a lot more. I was reflecting a lot more. I was even writing, like, I was going to start a blog on Krishna consciousness. I even got asked by a senior devotee to write for a magazine. And instead, you know, my reading and sadhana is much reduced from that time. And I was thinking, honestly, I was doubting, should I really be speaking? You know, am I qualified at this moment? But I did a prayer at that moment. I prayed to Prabhupada, and I just thought to myself, yeah, I'm just going to give my best. And through that, I felt so much through thinking that regardless of whether it's a good class or it's not a good class, I just do it for the pleasure of the Lord. And through that, I felt so much connection at the end of the class. And surprisingly, it was very difficult, I'll be honest, because so many people were coming in to offer the candles. That coordinator was shouting at them, and in the meantime, people were looking everywhere. But somehow, some people stayed till the end. And yeah, so I just feel that we all have certain things which make us feel connected to Krishna. And for me, sharing some realizations, sharing my struggles within Krishna consciousness, just in relation to the context of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, makes me feel connected to the Lord. And I really felt that Krishna was sending me a message there that just keep going, you know. And ultimately, it's not a gyan process. So I could know all the shlokas, I could know the Bhagavad Gita back to front, and I could still be very far away from Krishna. Or I could be like the illiterate Brahmin who was illiterate, but yet Lord Chaitanya praised him so much because he understood the heart, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita was in his heart. And this leads me to my final point of race. So when we're in anxiety, when we're in doubt, are we attached to the results? Can we ask for help from a devotee, from a sadhu? Can we connect to God through one of the 9 processes of devotional service? C. And finally, ultimately, there's no escape from anxiety in this world. That's just a given. Samsara Dava Navalita Loka. This world is a blazing forest fire of material existence. So if you think that we're in a calm spot, tomorrow health may go. Another day, family's health may go. Another day, family quarrels. Another day, finances. Another day, another anxiety. There's no end. But there is an escape. There is a way to escape. And this is through the only way to escape anxiety forever is I'll go back to the verse within the Bhagavad Gita, Matchita Sarva Durgani, Mat Prasada Tarasyasi, Atachetvam Ahankaran, Na Sharosyasi Vinakshasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. So if we can just become conscious of Krishna at every moment, that's the goal of Krishna consciousness, then we can be freed from anxiety even in this life if we can become Krishna conscious. and at the end of this life, we'll pass the final test and escape anxiety forever. So those were a few thoughts on this beautiful verse, this beautiful section, and this wonderful devotee, Yudhishthira Maharaj, who's feeling a great deal of anxiety and regret at this moment after the Battle of Kurukshetra. We talked a little bit about clearing doubts and something and not applying material logic to something spiritual. And finally, I gave this acronym of RACE, some practical things that we can apply in the context of Krishna consciousness when we face anxieties and when we face doubts. So I'd like to thank you for your kind attention, and please forgive me for any mistakes, and I'd welcome now any corrections, any comments or questions at this time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for this wonderful class. I really enjoyed it, and a few of my questions were also answered during the process. But before I say anything, are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, Hare Krishna. May I ask a question, please?
Yes,
Mataji,
and
Hare
before we, Mataji, sorry, before you ask your question, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Vidura Das, who has joined us all the way from Birmingham. So Prabhuji, if you can, you were here in Eldoret and with us. So if you can just switch on your video for just a second, we can do your darshan, and we can chant 3 Hari Bols to welcome you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. You have been a
Bol.
Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hari
Thank you
Bol,
very much.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari
Hari
Bol,
Bol, Hari Bol,
Bol.
Hari Bol.
I had a small comment about your acronym, RACE.
Yes, brilliant.
Very interesting. It was very nice class. Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
And I love the way you incorporate the different experiences you've had in your devotional creeper, even the negative ones, which end up as a positive. That was wonderful. And I really, a lot of what you said touched me also. And I have similar experiences in my own life, how at times when things are completely down still, somehow or other, we manage to glean something from that seemingly negative experience. As Prabhupada used to quote so often, man proposes, God disposes.
Yes.
So we may have some idea, oh, if I do this or I do that, or if this comes together for me, then I'll be happy. But Krishna has another idea. And on your last point in your acronym E, I remember when in the very early days, in the very early 80s, we used to do festival programs in Ireland, and where we would go to these big music festivals. We'd set up a pandal. We'd go around the whole festival area chanting and distributing prasadam and everything. And people would come to the pandal also. And you get a lot of different groups. Some people are, in favor of us. Most of them were intoxicated by one way or another. And a lot of people also were envious. We get a lot of, fanatical Christian groups who do everything to disrupt our program. I remember one time we got these born-agains came into our pandal. We had about 2,000 people in the pandal. And Pritu Prabhu, who was also in Eldoret with me, he was giving the talk. And one of the members of the more vociferous Christian group started screaming, "You guys, you're just escapists." And, that's quite a negative comment. That we're presenting the so-called ideal. So in that sense, we're supposed to be escapists. And Pritu, he turned around, he said, "Yes, we are escapists, you're right." He agreed with him. The man was completely floored. Yeah, because we want to escape this material world. That's the whole objective, is to get out of here. And like Prabhupada says in the last line of the purport almost, Bhishma excelled in all knowledge. I mean, this is like quite amazing. Excelled in all knowledge, including the Lord himself. I mean, I mean, because Krishna, like I was listening yesterday to a lecture from Srila Prabhupada when I was cooking the evening meal, and Prabhupada said in that lecture something that struck me. I never heard it before, and it was in New York in 1966. It was from Dr. Mishra's ashram before ISKCON was founded. Prabhupada used to give lectures there. And Prabhupada says, the devotee knows no other person other than the Lord. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, and the Lord knows no other person other than his devotee. So you see, here's Krishna. He covered Yudhisthira, as you pointed out, in order that Yudhisthira could hear from Bhishma, but not so much that he could hear from Bhishma, but to glorify Bhishma also. So the two things were integral, one to the other. And it's the Lord is always there waiting. He's waiting in anxiety for the opportunity to glorify his devotee. We want to glorify the Lord, but the Lord is 10 times, a million times more intelligent than we could ever be. And he's there thinking up ways, just like with Srimati Radharani and the gopis. We just recently had the Ras Purnim, and Krishna said to the gopis, there's absolutely no way that I can repay you other than the service that you have rendered to me. That's your payment. So this is something that we can also take on board. This is our payment. The service itself is our payment. And so in spite of the obstacles, and there are many, and we're in the material world, it's not Vaikuntha, still, we are just a bunch of escapists. So let it always remain that way. Jai, thank you very much, Prabhu. That was wonderful class. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidura Prabhuji, for sharing your experiences. And yeah, I really liked you. I think it's interesting that that term escapist, because we're looking to escape, but in one sense, we're not. As Krishna consciousness practiced in the right way is still tackling the problems of the world
Yes.
now as it is. So in one
Yes.
sense, we're not just running away and just chanting Hare Krishna and I know some people on the outside may think, oh, these Hare Krishnas, especially those who are renunciants, say, oh, they have it easy, they didn't do anything. And then when you actually engage with them, they're actually really trying to tackle, whether you're inside the ashram or outside of it, they're also working hard to help people to elevate their consciousness
Yes.
and in a way that actually solves the problems of the world, not runs away from them.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Pramila Mataji's question. Hare Krishna
Right.
Mataji. Sorry to interrupt.
Hare Krishna. A very nice discourse, Prabhuji, both of you. Prabhuji, you shared a very nice experience with us about the play for the Bhagavatam when it was going disastrously wrong, and you more or less called to Krishna. And you're such a blessed soul. He answered your prayer almost immediately and put it right. So I wanted to ask you, because I have had conflicting views on this question from different sources. So when we are in severe distress, be it health reasons, whatever, should we call on Krishna or not call on Krishna?
So just to reiterate Mataji's question, if we're in severe distress, should we call for Krishna? Should we not call for Krishna? So at the highest stage of bhakti, philosophically, we've discussed this in previous sanghas, the I only want your service. That's the mood of a pure devotee. But ultimately, and that's, we have to be honest with where we're at. And if we want to go to someone, we should go to Krishna for help. And through that, our material desires, my limited understanding is that our material desires, by going to Krishna at least for them, and for Krishna for relief, then they will be satisfied and pure. He will relieve our desires in such a way that we become purified and ultimately become closer to him. Now, My experience in my short time in Krishna consciousness is that sometimes you go to Krishna for help and things may get materially worse, but that was there to, but then it will work out, but not in the way that you expected it to work out. And there'll be some lesson to learn, which ultimately will bring you closer to the Lord. So those are some thoughts on that. But ultimately, we should go to Krishna for whatever distresses and make sincere prayers to him. I don't know if Vidura Prabhu, you would like to add anything.
No, that's a perfect answer. Thank you, Prabhu. That was ideal. I couldn't add a single thing. That was very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That was a very nice answer for me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pramila Machi.
Can I ask one question?
Yes,
Yes,
Vrinda.
Manji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, you said that in Kurukshetra, 640 million people there, and it was a lila. So does it mean that when we hear Bhagavatam and people saying also that Nand Maharaj had 900,000 cows? So was it a lila or true?
Both. Mataji, both. So the Battle of Kurukshetra, it did really happen. Nanda Maharaj did really have that many cows, but is also part of Krishna's Leela. And where Krishna is, he's beyond time and space. So these Leelas can expand and detract as much as possible. So as much as he desires. So this did really happen. We don't think that, oh, it's a Leela. It wasn't real. What did really happen, but it happened because Krishna was there and it was part of his Leela. And it couldn't have happened if Krishna wasn't there and it wasn't part of his Leela. Does that make sense, Mataji?
Yeah. Got it, yeah.
And also, if I may, please excuse
Yes,
me.
Prabhuji.
We all know the story of King Nigra. And when he inadvertently gave a cow that he'd already donated to another Brahmin, of course, he was cursed. And but he was giving a donation of 1 million cows a day in donations. And of course, in that incident with Nanda Maharaj, with the 900 lakhs of cows, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he explains that in this material world, we exist in a three-dimensional world, length, breadth, and height. But in the spiritual world, there are millions of dimensions, which is inconceivable to get your head around that. So you could be sitting in your kitchen or in your sitting room, as I am here at home in Birmingham, but it could be a completely different world, like millimeters away from my face. But because just like a dog has 47 times or something like that, the sense of smell that a human has, and an eagle flying 2 miles up in the sky can see a mouse running in the field, but and he can focus on that for his dinner. But we don't have that kind of sense. Our senses are limited, so we're also limited by the imprisonment we find ourselves within this three-dimensional world. But in the spiritual world, just like we know from the Sarabi cow, it can produce not only milk, but you can get anything you want from this the wish fulfilling trees in Vrindavan. I mean, I've been to those wish fulfilling trees in Vrindavan. I never get what I want, but and then anyway, we take it as face value from what we read in the scripture. I always ask for $1 million when I go there, but somehow or other, I don't even get 1 million pennies when I speak of dollars. But it's just a different world entirely, and to measure it from our understanding, our conception, it's just inconceivable. It can't be imagined because we're on a different level. We're still stuck in our three-dimensional thinking because that's the world we understand. That's the limitations of the material world. whereas there's no limitations whatsoever in the spiritual sphere. But one day, when oh when will that day be mine? My offenses ceasing, taste for the name increasing. When oh when will your mercy shine? When oh when will that day be mine? So that's, we can just take shelter of Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada, and we live in the hope. Jai, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. I think it's wonderfully put by Vidura Prabhuji, that again compounds the point that we're trying to almost apply our material logic and limited material senses to something which is beyond our comprehension. And as we discussed, and Prabhupada says so many times so nicely, that you're trying to understand Krishna through your knowledge, through your senses, but these are all limited, and Krishna's unlimited. So how are you going to understand him like that?
Yeah.
But you can, but only through bhakti. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much. I can reserve my questions for next time. I don't want to say anything. And the last statement that Vidura Prabhu made, I think that has summed it all up. And we have exhausted our time. Please, can I request Prahlad Prabhu? Prahlad, is it possible to end the session today?
Yes, Mataji.
And to switch on the
Haribol.
audio if you can.
Hang on. Haribol, how are you all? Hare Krishna. I'd like to start off by first thanking His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu for giving us this wonderful class today, as well as Vidura Prabhu for joining in and giving us his words of enlightenment as well. I didn't know that there were wish-giving trees in, Vrindavan, but I do know about wish-giving cows, so that was fun to learn. So thank you, Prabhus, for giving us your words of wisdom and this wonderful nectar, as well as the rest of the congregation as well for joining in to this wonderful Zoom program. Currently, we are on Kartik, so it's kind of busy and tight with the Damodara Rastakam going on, especially here in Nairobi. So thank you all for joining in. So I'd like to kindly request all the devotees assembled to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra once for His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu and also as well His Grace Vidura Das Prabhu. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Vancha
Vancha
Kalpa
Kalpa Trivishta Kripa Sindhu Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki
Yeah.
Grace Vidura Das Prabhu ki
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for joining us. And thank you very much, Vidura Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.